the summer of 1980, something happened in West Yorkshire, England that would defy logic and confound investigators for decades. It began as a simple missing person report, an ordinary man who vanished without reason, and ended as one of the most puzzling unexplained deaths in British history. His name was Zigmund Adamski, and what happened to him during the 5 days between his disappearance and his death has never been fully explained. It remains a story that stands on the uneasy edge between fact and mystery, logic and the unknown. Zigmund Adamski was an unlikely figure for such a legend. Born in Poland in 1923, he had seen the worst of the world during war and hardship. Seeking peace and stability, he and his wife, Lottie, moved to England in 1960, settling in the small mining village of Tingley near Wakefield. Life was quiet there. Rows of brick homes, familiar faces, and the deep rhythm of coal mining that defined the community. Zigmund was a steady worker, respected by colleagues and liked by everyone who knew him. He was cheerful, polite, and dependable. He and Lottie had no children, but their marriage was strong, their life simple. By every account, Zigmund was content. Nothing about him suggested danger, secrets, or mystery. June 6, 1980 was a warm Friday afternoon, one of those gentle English summer days when the light lingers late. At around 3 o'clock, Zigmund left his home to buy groceries from the local store. It was a short walk, no more than 20 minutes each way. Before leaving, he chatted with a neighbor about the weather, about small things. He seemed relaxed, in good spirits. Then he said goodbye to his wife, walked down the road, and was never seen alive again. When evening came and he still hadn't returned, Lottie began to worry. Zigmund wasn't the kind of man to lose track of time. By nightfall, she phoned friends and neighbors. Nobody had seen him. By midnight, she called the police. Officers searched the village, nearby roads, bus stops, and hospitals. Nothing. It was as if the man had simply vanished. There were no witnesses, no signs of struggle, no reason for him to disappear. The next morning came, then another and another. Days passed, each one heavier with uncertainty. To everyone who knew him, it made no sense at all. 5 long days later, on Wednesday, June 11th, the mystery took a chilling turn. In the nearby town of Todmorden, 20 miles from Tingley, a young man named Trevor Parker arrived at his family's coal yard around 3:45 p.m. He was opening the gates, getting ready for the afternoon shift, when he saw something strange, something that made him stop cold. Lying motionless on top of one of the towering coal piles, about 12 feet high, was the body of a man. At first, Trevor thought it must be a worker who had collapsed, or maybe a drunk who had wandered in, but the coal yard gates had been locked all morning and no one should have been inside. He climbed closer. The man wasn't moving. His eyes were open, staring blankly at the sky. His clothes looked neat but strangely disarranged. It didn't look like an accident. The surface of the coal was undisturbed. No footprints, no sliding marks, no indication that anyone had climbed the pile or machinery had been used. It looked, quite literally, as if the man had been dropped there from above. Startled and shaken, Trevor ran to call the police. Constable Alan Godfrey, a respected local officer, was the first to arrive. It was just after 4 in the afternoon. He found exactly what Trevor had described, a middle-aged man lying on his back atop the coal pile, his face frozen in an expression of pain or perhaps terror. There were no footprints, no drag marks, no sign of a struggle. The gate was locked and no one had seen or heard anything. It was the kind of scene that made no sense from the very first moment. The man was soon identified as the missing miner from Tingley, 56-year-old Zigmund Adamski, but that discovery only deepened the confusion. The circumstances of his death were unlike anything Godfrey or his colleagues had ever seen. At first glance, paramedics thought he had suffered a heart attack, but when they examined his body more closely, they noticed several disturbing details. There were strange burn marks on the back of his neck and shoulders, small circular lesions like second-degree burns. Over them was a thick, transparent, gel-like substance, as though someone had tried to treat the wounds. The burns looked deliberate, but the application of ointment suggested care or even compassion. No one could say which. His clothes raised even more questions. His coat was buttoned incorrectly, his shirt missing, his belt unfastened, and his shoes only half on. It looked like someone unfamiliar with how to dress him had done so hastily. Yet the clothes themselves were clean, almost spotless. His fingernails tidy, his skin washed. He had been missing for 5 days, but his beard showed less than a day's growth. It was as if he had been somewhere indoors, fed, washed, and kept alive until shortly before he died. But where had he been, and with whom? The coroner, Dr. Alan Edwards, performed a post-mortem the following day. His report would only deepen the mystery. Zigmund had indeed died of heart failure, but he had no history of cardiac problems. His stomach contained partially digested food, proof he had eaten within a few hours of death. The burns on his neck and shoulders were 2 or 3 days old, and the gel applied to them could not be identified by any laboratory. It wasn't a standard medical compound. No hospital in the area had treated anyone matching his description. Every test came back inconclusive. Even the environment around the body refused to cooperate with logic. There was no coal dust on his clothes or skin, something impossible for anyone who had climbed a 12-foot pile of coal. Investigators ruled out the idea that machinery had lifted him. There were no tire marks or tool traces nearby. The body seemed to have appeared there by impossible means. Officers at the scene quietly admitted they had no explanation. When news of the discovery reached the press, it exploded across Britain. The details were so bizarre that every newspaper wanted the story. Was it a kidnapping? A murder? Something stranger? As speculation grew, Todmorden became the focus of nationwide attention. Locals whispered about odd lights in the sky that had been seen in the area for years. The town already had a reputation for unexplained aerial phenomena. Now, with a dead man found in impossible circumstances, the whispers grew louder. For some, the answer had to be otherworldly. 6 months later, in November 1980, Constable Alan Godfrey, the same officer who had found Adamski's body, experienced something that would forever link his name to the case. In the early hours before dawn, he was sent to investigate reports of a herd of cows wandering the streets of Todmorden. Driving down Burnley Road, he spotted what looked like an overturned double-decker bus ahead of him. Thinking there had been an accident, he slowed his patrol car, but as he drew closer, he realized it wasn't a bus at all. Hovering silently about 5 feet off the ground was a large, metallic, diamond-shaped object, rotating slowly and reflecting the light from his headlights. The road around it was eerily still. Godfrey tried to radio headquarters, but his radio was dead. Even the car's engine began to stall. Reaching for his notebook, he quickly sketched what he saw. The entire drawing took about 30 seconds. When he looked up again, the object was gone, vanished. Disoriented, Godfrey realized his car was now hundreds of yards farther down the road than it had been before. Checking his watch, he discovered that more than 20 minutes had passed, though to him it felt like less than a minute. The soles of his police boots were split at the toe, as if he had been dragged. Later that night, the missing cows were found standing in a field that was locked and fenced, with no hoofprints in the mud and no sign of how they got there. Once again, the impossible had occurred. When his story became public, the reaction was brutal. Colleagues laughed, superiors dismissed it. Godfrey, once considered an exemplary officer, found himself mocked and isolated. The media called him the UFO cop. Eventually, under pressure and ridicule, he left the police force, but he never retracted his account. Years later, under hypnosis, he recalled more details, strange lights, figures, and an experience he couldn't explain. Whether real or imagined, it changed his life. And inevitably, people connected his experience to the Adamski case. Still, there were more earthly explanations. In 2005, members of the British UFO Research Association reopened the Adamski file and uncovered details of family tensions that had been overlooked.
In the months before his death, a female relative had moved in with Zigmund and Lottie after separating from her husband. There had been conflict and restraining orders. Some investigators speculated that Zigmund may have been caught in the middle, possibly kidnapped by the estranged husband, held for days, and then dumped in panic after dying from a heart attack. It sounded plausible, but there was no proof. How did he get the burns? Why the strange ointment? And how could anyone have placed his body on a locked coal pile without leaving a single footprint? The human explanation seemed just as impossible as the supernatural one. No suspect was ever arrested. The case quietly faded from headlines, unsolved. The official cause of death remained heart failure with unexplained circumstances. Yet among those who studied the file, there was a quiet understanding this was not an ordinary case. The puzzle pieces still don't fit. The missing 5 days, the unidentifiable gel, the spotless clothing, the untouched coal, every detail resists logic. The Adamski mystery sits somewhere between crime and legend, a cold case that refuses to rest. Even seasoned investigators admitted they had never seen anything like it. One called it the most baffling death I've ever encountered. More than 40 years later, the town of Todmorden still carries the shadow of that mystery. Visitors arrive with cameras and notebooks, chasing answers that have eluded everyone else. Some look to the skies, others comb through police archives, convinced that a forgotten clue is waiting to be found. Yet every trail ends the same way, in silence. What happened to Zigmund Adamski during those 5 lost days? Was he abducted and later abandoned? Was he cared for by someone who tried to save him only for his heart to give out? Or was there something stranger, something that defies our understanding of life and death, science and possibility? No matter the theory, one fact remains certain. On that bright summer afternoon in 1980, a man left his home to buy groceries and never returned. 5 days later, he was found dead under conditions no one could explain. Every attempt to rationalize it has fallen short. His death became part of British folklore, whispered alongside the country's greatest unsolved mysteries, a story both tragic and haunting. Zigmund Adamski's death was ruled natural, yet nothing about it felt natural. His expression frozen in fear, the burns that no one could identify, the coal pile untouched beneath him, all of it speaks to a mystery that refuses to be buried. Some believe that one day new evidence will appear. Others think the truth lies beyond the limits of human reason. Perhaps both are true. As for Alan Godfrey, he would later say that the Adamski case changed him forever. It was, he said, the strangest investigation of his career, a case that made him question everything he thought he knew about the world. He never forgot the sight of the man's body lying clean and still against the black of the coal, a picture that stayed burned into his mind. Whether he believed aliens were involved or not, he admitted one thing: the official story never made sense. The town of Todmorden has moved on, yet the mystery endures in documentaries, books, and whispered conversations among those who still wonder what really happened. For many, the Adamski case is more than just an unsolved death. It's a symbol of the unknown, of how little we truly understand about the world we live in. It reminds us that even in an age of satellites and science, mystery still has a place. A man can step out on an ordinary afternoon and vanish into a story that outlives him, a story that challenges the boundaries of belief. Whatever the truth may be, Zigmund Adamski's fate remains one of Britain's most haunting enigmas, a tale suspended forever between heaven and earth. And until the day the truth is known, if that day ever comes, his name will remain etched in the archives of the unexplained. May Zigmund Adamski rest in peace.